Afghanistan, a land so mysterious that possibly your only knowledge of this place comes from the grainy footage of missiles firing, American soldiers bleeding, bombs exploding, or whenever you hear the words
Taliban fighters,
Al-Qaeda,
suicide car bombing,
deadly violence.
But rarely have we given much thought about what happened before the war in Afghanistan. Before the chaos, before the death, before the bombs, before the Taliban, before the Al-Qaeda. What happened before all that? I want to bring you back to a time when the word Afghanistan meant something better. A beacon of civilization, a land of culture, the capital of great empires, an important part of the Great Silk Road. When Afghanistan used to be a land where women are free to wear what they wanted, work, study, and go to schools. With no further ado, I bring you Afghanistan, a short story. What's up everyone, my name is Tim, and I will be presenting the shortened history of all the countries in the world, alphabetically, starting with A, with Afghanistan. So the big question is, where should we begin with the history of Afghanistan? While the country of Afghanistan only started existing as a state in the 1700s under the Timurid Empire, we will travel back to the ancient era for this story, a time of brilliant Greek philosophers, legendary battles, and when marrying your sister to keep the royal bloodline pure is totally alright.
What are you doing, step bro?
The earliest recorded people that lived in Afghanistan were the Indo-Aryans, who lived in the region from around 3000 BC to around 1500 BC. But the recorded history of Afghanistan really began in the 6th century BC with the Timurid Empire. Now, Afghanistan is a geopolitically important location, of course, concentrated right in the crossroads of Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. The region of modern-day Afghanistan was conquered by the Achaemenid Cyrus the Great, a love child among historians for being a champion of human rights, a lawgiver, and for creating an empire that controlled 25% goddamn of the world's population. Afghanistan at this point was a place of intermixed faiths, with Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Hinduism all existing at the same time. During this time, Afghanistan was prospering under a period of stability and oh wait, it's the MVP, Alexander the Great! Alexander's story was, in a nutshell, yo Darius, I'ma take back my Greek land, take over your empire, kick your ass, and make your mama love me. Man, that shit ain't gonna happen. Then Alexander proceeded to take back Greek land, take over Darius' empire, kick his ass, and make his mama love him. I'm serious. Just imagine getting your ass whooped by the person you hate the most and your mom replacing you with that person cause you ain't shit. Alexander's reign over Afghanistan did not last long, but the legacy he left behind was enormous. Once a purely Iranic region, Greek soldiers started living in Afghanistan and intermixing with the locals, and a new hybrid Greco-Buddhism came out because of this. This was a time when you got to see Greeks worshipping in Buddhist temples and Afghans praying to Zeus and Hera. Greek influence remained strong in the region even after Alexander's empire fell, and Afghanistan became a dog toy being tossed around between the rump Greek states, the Mauryans of India, and the Parthians of Iran. Centuries of uncertainty, however, were counterbalanced by a period of culture. The famous Buddhas of Bamyan that were unfortunately destroyed by the Taliban in 2001 were built sometime during the 4th to 5th century AD and served as monuments to the architectural skills of the Afghans, and proved that even when times were bad, the Afghans make hella good art. From around the 1st century BC to the 1st century AD, Afghanistan was in the center of the prospering Silk Road, and cities like Kandahar and Herat grew in importance and prospered. And following domination by foreign ethnic groups like the Kushans, who were most likely related to the Huns, and the Turkic Hephthalites, the Afghans were subjected to Sasanian Persian rule. But, unknown to the Afghans nor their powerful Persian overlords, a small religious group stemming from the western edges of the Arabian Peninsula was about to turn the world upside down. These people, once just considered unimportant desert dwellers and polytheists, united under one god and their prophet, and defeated both the mighty Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire, conquering Arabia, Egypt, the Maghreb, Iberia, the Levant, Iran, and of course Afghanistan. Afghanistan's history was never going to be the same. For the first time in history, there was a single religion uniting the entire land, a faith so deeply ingrained in Afghan culture that it's almost impossible for us to separate both today. Enter Islam. The conversion of the Afghans to Islam was not a simple process, but a long, complex situation that took centuries to complete. When the Rashidun Caliphate first took over, rebellions would pop up occasionally, and the conversion process often required a more heavy-handed approach. But Afghanistan transformed not only faith-wise. The Arabs brought the Arabic script that modern Pashto and Dari, the national languages of Afghanistan, are based on. And the scientific, literary, and artistic renaissance of the Islamic Golden Age was fully embraced in Afghanistan as well. By the 8th century, Afghanistan was firmly under the control of the Caliphate, and local Islamic dynasties started to just pop up. Dynasties like the Timurids, Saffarids, Samanids, and Ghaznavids all played prominent roles in shaping Afghan identity. While the Tahirids, Saffarids, and Samanids were all of Persian stock, the Ghaznavids were a bit interesting, as they were originally Turkic slaves, more commonly known as Mamluks, who took over the Samanid dynasty during a period of decentralization and chaos. The story of Arab and Persian elites abusing their Turkic slaves and then having their empires taken over by them will be a recurring theme throughout much of Islamic history. Trust me, I'm not exaggerating. While the Ghaznavids were not of Persian blood, they loved everything Persian, speaking the Persian language, writing Persian literature, adopting Persian lifestyles, creating Persian art, eating Persian food, and using Persian as the court language. They were basically Persian weebs. Under the reign of the Ghaznavids, they transformed the city of Ghazni into a jewel of a city in the Islamic world, and its existence today is testimony of the Ghaznavids' ambitious building projects during their reign over Afghanistan. The medieval Islamic dynasty musical chairs continued with the Ghurid dynasty, which was originally Buddhist, and finally the Khwarezmian, seriously, like how do you even pronounce this? Khwarezmian dynasty, where once again a Turkic slave took over the previous kingdom and made himself sultan. Once the vassals of the powerful Seljuk Empire, the Khwarezmians became an independent polity, controlling Iran, Central Asia, parts of the Caucasus, and Afghanistan, all with the help of their powerful military. This made the Khwarezmians proud, so proud that they believed themselves to be the successors of the ancient Persians, an Islamic powerhouse, an unbeatable force of nature, and pride is often the first step of downfall. In the fateful year of 1218, a friendly trade mission sent by a dude called Genghis Khan, you might have heard of him, arrived to the Khwarezmian city of Otrar, hoping to start a warm and friendly relationship with the Muslim kingdom. But the very intelligent governor of Otrar made a very intelligent decision. These men must be spies! Arrest them! Governor, they're here for trade and an alliance. Maybe it wouldn't be so wise to hurt these men. Look, I'm not trying to persuade you, Governor, but just please think about the repercussions of your decision. I now see why your wife left you, Jim. Arrest them now. The members of the trade mission were soon executed after their arrest, but one of them managed to return to Genghis Khan's court to deliver the message. Alright, I'm giving Sultan Muhammad one last chance for peace. Tell him to punish the governor of Otrar for his crimes, and that will be the end of it. The mighty Genghis Khan asked for the governor of Otrar's head as compensation for his losses. Yo, who does your Khan think he is? I'ma cut your head off, cut the beards off your two friends, and take a dump on your Khan's lawn. Like hell I'm gonna believe a no-name tribal leader is gonna do anything about it. Genghis then proceeded to destroy the Khwarezmian Empire, raze its cities to nothingness, pour molten silver into the eyes and ears of the governor of Otrar, kill 25% of the empire's population, and take over 22% of all land on earth. While the damage caused by the Mongols over Afghanistan definitely was long-lasting, a lingering legacy of the Mongols in Afghanistan today would be the Hazara people, a mysterious sub-ethnic group within the country of Afghanistan. While having unclear origins, it is almost certain that they are descendants of Mongol soldiers who stayed in Afghanistan and had some fun time with the local ladies. But similar to a high school relationship, the connection between the Mongols and Afghanistan was hot and steamy at first, but quickly fell apart to pieces because of relationship mismanagement. After the Mongol Empire, Afghanistan then became split between the Chagatai Khanate and the Ilkhanate, both remnant states of the previous Mongol Empire. And unfortunately, Afghanistan really did lose a lot of its prominence during this time. That is, until the rise of Tamerlane. Wait, who's Tamerlane, you might ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Tamerlane, or Timur, was the ultimate Chad of the Islamic world. Born to the Turkic Barlas tribe of Central Asia, it was Timur's dream to reform the Mongol Empire. But before the young boy could accomplish his dream, he managed to lose several of his fingers and got one of his legs crippled because of a botched burglary attempt. Unhindered by these disabilities, though, Timur managed to rise up the military ranks, turned the leader of his country, the Chagatai Khan, into his puppet, went on to conquer vast lands in Central Asia, Iran, the Caucasus, even India, and even defeat the Ottomans in battle. And if you play EU4, you know that shit ain't easy. It is important to note that Timur has never lost a single battle in his entire military career. And by the early 1400s, it was part of his plan to invade the East. That's right, people, Mr. Cripple No Fingers attempted to conquer China. But before he could take the largest piece of his Mongol Empire puzzle, China, Timur died in 1405 in Central Asia, thus leading to the fracturing of his giant empire. You might ask, besides being an impressive conqueror, what has Timur brought to the Afghan people? What was his legacy in the land of Afghanistan? Well, it was his descendants, the Timurid dynasty, who turned the city of Herat into an important capital of the largest Muslim empire at that time. It was the center of the Timurid Renaissance, an era of intellectual discourse, inhumanly gorgeous architecture, ageless artwork, and so much more. While all good things must come to an end, Afghanistan's contribution to the Islamic world and world heritage in general is just too underappreciated. But it's never too late to start discovering this cultural powerhouse. By 1507, the Timurid Empire was split in a three-way between the nomadic Uzbeks of the north, the Persians from the west, and the Mughals from the east. The Uzbeks were eventually defeated by the Persians, and now only the Persians and Mughals were left, and the borders of Afghanistan never really took solid form. Afghanistan during the 16th to 18th century was like a kid of a divorced couple. Some days he's with Daddy Persia, but Karen always gets the keeps. While we will talk more about this in the India and Pakistan episodes, the first ruler of the Mughal Empire, Babur, began his invasions in the south by using Afghanistan as his base, giving Afghanistan a special place within Mughal historiography. But throughout all this time, Afghanistan has only been referred to as a region, a culturally rich region that has been taken over by kingdoms and empires and even the nomadic Uzbeks of the north. However, in 1709, an independent Afghanistan came to be. The Hotaki Empire was created by a man called Mirwais Hotak, who was a local Sunni tribal chief. Mirwais, who had it with the ruling Persians trying to impose Shia Islam onto the Sunni locals, wanted to change everything. Mirwais was no pushover, and sensing that his Persian overlords were growing weaker by the day, he did all he could to gain the favor of the Persian Shah, Hussein. Your Highness, you've been right all this time. Shia Islam really is more rad. See, I told you so. You guys really should have listened to me in the first place, so we didn't have to go through all this trouble. You're totally right, man. Hey, do you think it's cool that I make the Hajj to Mecca? I mean, don't worry, it's a totally harmless expedition. Whoa. Of course, buddy. I will always put my trust in you. Mirwais then obtained a fatwa from the Islamic authorities to rebel against the Persian outsiders, returned to Afghanistan to rally his people, took down the Persian Empire, captured the Shah, and made himself Emir of Afghanistan. Afghanistan briefly controlled the Persian capital and almost all of Persia, until Nadir Shah swooped in and did a reverse card on them. But the recovery was quite quick, and a new Afghan kingdom under the Durrani Empire held sway over Afghanistan and nearly all of Pakistan. The Durrani Empire began in 1747, with the Afghans electing the young Ahmad Shah Durrani as leader, conquering from Pakistan to Iran and even managing to defeat the powerful Marathas in the south. The Durranis became the second greatest Islamic empire during the 18th century, just behind the Ottomans. Ahmad Shah Durrani even had plans to invade western China, the mad lad. But when the Durranis failed to realize was, as much as they're a threat to its neighboring nations, they were merely a chess piece in the larger game. A game with two players from a distant continent, two enemies that the Afghans never encountered before. One of them controls all of North Asia and enjoys vodka a bit too much, and the other, once controlling just a tiny island, took over a quarter of the world because of an unhealthy obsession with tea. They were the Russian Empire and the British Empire, two imperial superpowers at each other's throats. And standing right between these two giants was Afghanistan, the prized jewel both the British and Russians wanted under their control. To the Afghans, this spelled disaster, but to the Europeans, this was just a game. A game so great, historians call it the Great Game. The entire 19th century was a century of chaos for the Afghans. It was effectively in a state of limbo, actually, and both the Russians and the British knew if Afghanistan were to fall to one side, it spelled global war. But nonetheless, war is oftentimes inevitable. The first Anglo-Afghan war was fought over the throne of Afghanistan, with the new emir Dost Muhammad Barakzai challenged by the British-backed Shah Shuja, a member of the Durrani dynasty. This conflict proved to be a humiliating defeat for the British, whose British and Sikh forces were annihilated in Kabul in 1842. Dost Muhammad remained emir of Afghanistan after the war, but two more Anglo-Afghan wars were to follow. The Second Anglo-Afghan War started due to British fears of increasing Russian influence in Afghanistan and resulted in Afghanistan essentially becoming a British protectorate, basically a puppet, and having its southern territories ceded to the new British Raj, which absolutely did not leave half of the Afghan population living in modern-day Pakistan, splitting the population in two and causing an ethnic conflict that lasted this very day. Hey, colonial powers gotta do what colonial powers do. Afghanistan experienced westernization throughout the entire country. Afghan royalty began wearing European clothing, Afghan armies adopted European weapons, and Afghanistan supplied much of the opium for Britain to sell to China. You gotta admit, the British were kind of the bad guys, but they're good at their job. Afghanistan finally had enough by 1919, and in the aftermath of the 3-month-long Third Anglo-Afghan War, achieved independence, ending isolation, and entered the world stage. Afghan society was rapidly changing. Slavery was abolished in 1923, elementary education became compulsory, and women were no longer forced to wear the veil. And Mahmoud Tarzi, an Afghan intellectual and politician, traveled to Turkey and was inspired by the secular Republic of Turkey under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, transforming Afghanistan from an Islamic state into a modernized secular one. However, radical modernization was met with internal tension, as Afghan tribal leaders saw these changes as undermining their traditions. These reforms had unknowingly began a long, dark period of coups and counter-coups in the country. One king assassinated just to have the next one exiled. This back-and-forth power struggle between the conservative and liberal parties remained a major problem for Afghanistan for the next few decades. In 1933, Muhammad Zahir Shah succeeded as the new king of Afghanistan. Right when he got on the throne, he had to walk a fine line between the Islamists and the Reformists. And by the Cold War, there are two bigger powers that he had to balance: the United States and the Soviet Union.
Because I'm literally a communist.
While still an authoritarian government, Zahir Shah's government tried to allow different political parties to have a voice in the country, ranging from hardline Islamists to far-left Marxists. Uncertainty and fear of another civil war became the prime reason for the Afghan Prime Minister, Dawood Khan, cousin of the king, to implement more draconian means of governing the country. Unhappy with his cousin's methods though, Zahir Shah fired his cousin from his position. Dawood Khan, now feeling betrayed, was about to end Zahir Shah's whole career. In 1973, while Zahir Shah was traveling abroad, Dawood Khan took this opportunity to overthrow the monarchy and established a presidential republic. Dawood Khan tried to implement social reforms in Afghanistan, but his goal of uniting all Afghan lands and nationalist rhetoric angered his Pakistani neighbors, resulting in a long proxy war between the two countries. More problems grew for Dawood Khan as communism became an attractive ideology among many Afghans, but more importantly, for members of the National Army. Dawood Khan's downfall came in 1978, with the PDPA, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, staging a successful coup and executing the president. This single event started a long civil war, in fact, the longest civil war in Afghanistan, one that is still ongoing today. While there was unity in the support of overthrowing Dawood Khan's government, the PDPA was split among multiple factions. There were the Khalqists, led by Taraki and Amin, and the Parchamites, led by Karmal. With the Khalqists gaining absolute power in Afghanistan, Karmal and his followers were banished to the Soviet Union. Tensions then arose between Taraki and Amin, leading to Amin overthrowing Taraki and placing himself in power. But Amin's utter lack of competence and his cruelty towards his own people made the Soviets shake their heads, and Leonid Brezhnev, then leader of the Soviet Union, to say, and I quote, "Someone seems to have missed his shot." The Soviets then occupied Afghanistan and executed Amin. They brought back Karmal, who was exiled to the Soviet Union, and he came back to Afghanistan as the new communist leader. But the Soviets were met with a guerrilla force that they never faced before, the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen were mainly composed of opposition groups against the PDPA, rural mountain folk, as well as foreign support groups from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. From 1978 to 1989, the Soviets and Afghans were in a full-on guerrilla war, with neither side gaining a decisive victory. As international pressure mounted and war exhaustion reached breaking point, the Soviets retreated and Afghanistan was left to its own devices. Afghanistan was in a state of disunity, a patchwork of provinces controlled by warlords and the Mujahideen. But it was during this time that a group known as the Taliban came to the forefront of Afghan politics. Starting out as students of madrasas in southern Afghanistan, members of the Taliban were trained by the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence agency, to combat the Soviet troops. But when Afghanistan became free real estate, the Taliban took its chance to establish dominance over the country, at its peak controlling 90% of the entire country. Under the Taliban, Afghan women were brutally oppressed. The Hazara minority became targets of ethnic cleansing, human trafficking became widespread, and religious minorities like Christians, Buddhists, and Jews were persecuted. But not all hope was lost. A national hero of Afghanistan, Ahmad Shah Massoud, was one of the toughest enemies of the Soviets. But being opposed to the Taliban's ideology, he allied with his once rival, Abdul Rashid Dostum, and formed the Northern Alliance. The alliance's successes were limited due to lack of international aid, and Massoud's assassination by the Taliban on September 9, 2001 certainly dealt a lot of damage, especially to the morale of the alliance. But everything changed after the fateful day of September 11, 2001.
Here's the plate, here's the tape. You see the plane coming in from what looks like the east side, and it blows into the building.
And in late 2001, the entire world was looking at Afghanistan. The US government demanded the Taliban to turn over Osama bin Laden, close its training camps, and allow US authorities to inspect these camps. However, all three were denied, and the United States launched Operation Enduring Freedom, and officially began the War on Terror. The initial phase of the US invasion of Afghanistan seemed successful, with intensive bombing across the country by US and UK forces, leading to the Taliban surrendering the important stronghold of Kandahar. An interim government was placed in Afghanistan, but the Taliban remained an insurgency force that proved to be a difficult problem to deal with as time went on. By 2014, the US government has withdrawn most of its troops away from Afghanistan, leaving only behind a small garrison to train the local army. And by 2019, progress has been made in peace negotiations, with the Taliban, the US government, and the Afghan government having met up to discuss the future of Afghanistan. It seems like Afghanistan is a country riddled with pain and suffering, and there's no end to its misfortunes. And as dark and depressing as its modern history sounds, the Afghan people have not given up. Afghanistan is experiencing a rapid growth in literacy, improvements in education, widespread use of cell phones, and also the internet, a growth in tourism, and even a new hip-hop scene. Afghanistan's culture is reaching new levels of popularity as the world is becoming more and more interconnected with the internet. I even got into learning more about Afghan traditional music after watching Yaron Pier's performance of the Afghan Rabab. It's seriously one of the coolest instruments I've ever heard, and it pairs so well with the cello, which we all know is the best instrument on the planet. Afghanistan is a tough road ahead in the future, and there will surely be more obstacles along its path. However, if there's anything to take away from learning Afghanistan's history, it's that the Afghans are some of the most resilient and positive peoples on earth. A people who can generate art, music, architecture, and poetry in times of war and chaos. A people who can stare danger in the eye and say, "We'll make it through." And I'm sure that one day, Afghanistan will be on the international stage again, for being the Dor-i-Durrani, the pearl of pearls of South Asia. Thank you all for watching, and if you click like and subscribe, you will make a history-loving Asian man very happy.